Hello and welcome to the Music Professor channel. I'm Matthew King and I'm here with Loki, and today we're going to present part 2, Rachmaninoff 2, part 2, Rach 2, part 2. The reason we're doing this, well, the first video I think went quite well and I was really delighted by all the comments, so many enthusiastic responses, and so many of you love the piece, of course, but loads of incredibly interesting things came out of that, and a couple of questions that I thought I'd really quickly respond to, just interesting things that people picked up on. One point, a couple of you observed the beginning of the concerto is like the James Bond theme, and the reason for that is quite simple actually. It's just that they're both the James Bond theme is a root position triad with the top note moving up chromatically and back down in a palindromic way, which of course is exactly what you get in the middle voice of the Rachmaninoff opening. Although, of course, Rachmaninoff pushes it much further, he pushes it right up to the F7 and then back down. But essentially, it's a very similar structure. I wouldn't be at all surprised, actually, if John Barry, who wrote the famous Bond tune, wasn't influenced by Rach 2. It seems quite likely that he was. So that's an answer to that question. The other point that was made was about the famous early prelude, the Moscow Bells prelude in C-sharp minor, Rachmaninoff's most popular piece when he was alive. Poor chap couldn't really give a solo recital, literally couldn't give a solo recital, even up to his final concert, without playing it somewhere in the programme or having it as an encore. So poor man, he hated it, but right up to his last recital, which I think was in 1943 in the US, he still had to wheel out this piece that he'd written when he was 18, the C-sharp minor prelude, which of course begins with its famous sort of portentous three-note 6-5-1 figure with the big chords over the top, and that, of course, is very closely related, isn't it, to the four-note cadential pattern in the second concerto. Now, whether that was conscious, I think perhaps it was, and maybe it was a question of Rachmaninoff admitting to himself that yes, the essence of his mature style is somehow in that prelude, acknowledging that that piece is a self-defining piece, absolutely, but on some level also admitting that it isn't one of his best. I mean, of all Rachmaninoff's pieces, it's probably the least sophisticated. However, another fascinating connection between that early prelude and the second concerto is this. The passage in question, and it's really interesting, it happens at the end of the prelude, so this is the early prelude in C-sharp minor, is that he has this fascinating thing right at the end where he goes, he has this cadential thing, not unlike the second concerto, and then down to the bottom C-sharp, and then he plays this marvellous bell-like game, harmonising, that's two, three different chords, four. That's almost the same as the second concerto, the way it goes to the dominant seventh, or the dominant in the root, and then this one, well, that's F sharp minor 6 with a C sharp in the bass, and then finally finishes off like that. So it's really like the opening of the F minor concerto. But at the end of the prelude, it's just this bell-like mystery, and it is rather marvellous, isn't it? And I think he knew it was marvellous, but he had an even better idea, which was, what if I begin a concerto with that kind of procedure? And of course, it becomes even more extraordinary in the second concerto. So that's answering that question, if it does answer it. And then a final question, a fascinating question from adude9882, which I didn't really answer fully. adude9882 asked me, well, it was really a question about, they find the music suspect because it's what they describe as the music of the bourgeoisie at the height of their power, and they connect all the emotion and everything, the bombastic character, to something that led to the First World War. I think it's a bit harsh. They also contrast it, curiously but interestingly, with Strawberry Fields, the Beatles, 1967. It's a different world, isn't it? But it's an interesting thing to say that the Beatles, you also find voice leading and so on in their music, and in a sense their music is more representative of the people. Or it's like, you know, they are working class lads writing these extraordinary works of art in the 60s. And none of that I disagree with, except of course the Beatles were also reliant on the amazing input of George Martin, who was actually a graduate of Guildhall School of Music and Drama, where I'm a professor, so I consider that a badge of honour for Guildhall that George Martin went there. Well, George Martin was a fabulously sophisticated musician, so he brought his sophistication to the production and the orchestration of many of those songs. Strawberry Fields is a classic case. So there is very much a classical element. One could even say bombastic, if you wanted to use that term, because he brings in trumpets and strings and all sorts of classical processes into the production. But I think as far as Rachmaninoff is concerned, let's move away from the Beatles. I mean, he belonged to the aristocracy, like Tolstoy, and you know this remarkable, cultured, brilliant group of people who were aristocrats in that late fin de siècle Russian world that was going to get absolutely blown to smithereens by the revolution, and many of those people were killed by the Bolsheviks. I mean, I don't personally think that's in any way a good thing. I think it was a terrible thing, and I think it denuded Russia of a lot of amazing human beings and a lot of amazing artwork that was going on in those upper echelons of Russian society. And I realise, you know, far be it from me to say that aristocracy is where art belongs. Of course it doesn't. But I don't think that class really should be that much of a factor in the way that we assess the quality of music. I think that whatever the economic position of the person in question is, it's really about the calibre of work that's coming out that really matters. In Rachmaninoff's case, of course, it was impoverished aristocracy. They were living in a relatively small flat in St. Petersburg. But yeah, I mean, they had enough money to live relatively leisured lives. But, you know, that's not a stick to beat Rachmaninoff with. The emotions are real. So I guess if we were making a comparison, we might make it with an artist like Chekhov, who was roughly similar to Rachmaninoff in terms of his position in society and writing plays about upper class people mainly. The thing is, what's marvellous in those plays is the absolutely authentic drama, the real emotions, the tensions and so on going on. I don't think class ever has much of a... It shouldn't really be a factor in the way we appraise great art. I really don't think it should. You know, imagine Jane Austen, who surely is one of the greatest novelists in the English language. You know, she concerns herself almost exclusively with extremely wealthy people, but she does it with fantastic humanity. I just think we have to go with people where they are. You know, they are in the social stratum in which they find themselves, and they do what they do, and if they do it well, it's marvellous. And that's Rachmaninoff, really. So this is where we got to last time. We had got to the beginning of the second subject, and I think we'll pick up on that and just power on to the end of the first movement. And in the process, I'm kind of experimenting. This is a follow-up on the first episode. Let's see if it's popular, and if it is, we'll go on and do movements 2 and 3. I think we got to this point with the second subject where, you know, I'd introduced the melody, and what I want to talk about really is Rachmaninoff's absolute mastery of form and to some extent rhythm, as well as harmony and melody. These are famous, but it's the form is not discussed very much, and neither is his extraordinary talent for rhythm. Let's talk about form quickly. Form, very off-putting word. Everyone immediately is taken back to school when you use the word form. I mean, it even sounds like a form room, a classroom. So I don't really like the word. I think it's better actually to think in terms of narrative arc or architecture. Perhaps music falls somewhere between those two. Part story, very much in Rachmaninoff's case, a kind of story. Part architecture, because there's this sense in which music is, and I think someone used this term once, a sort of acoustic architecture. Great composers construct these beautiful things which are as wonderful in their construction as a beautiful building. You know, if you imagine St. Peter's Basilica or so, or the Leaning Tower of Pisa or something, although it's a bit wonky, but it's still fabulous. A beautiful building, or the Taj Mahal, a beautiful building has this impact because of its perfect symmetry and the shape and the way it occupies the space and the way it resonates with the landscape around it, all these things. Music is somewhat similar if it's well constructed. It's absolutely satisfying in a way that it can't be if it isn't. And this is absolutely satisfying. Right, let's talk about the second subject. So we got to the end of the first phrase. Second phrase. Can I just say something about counterpoint? Because most people accepted my view that Rachmaninoff's great contrapuntist, but one or two people argued the case that it's just arpeggiated, like Eric Blom said. Well, I just don't really accept that. Because if you look at these patterns, yes, they contain arpeggiated elements, but he's inherited something from Chopin, his hero, that you don't any longer, and this was very much Chopin's position, you don't, like John Field used to do, or like the great bel canto Italian composers of the early 19th century, you don't just write, accompaniments. You write accompaniments that contain within themselves lines which therefore give them a kind of autonomy. As soon as you create an autonomous character in all your accompanimental material, you start to liberate it and enable it to take on a life of its own. And that happens all the time with Rachmaninoff, so much so that you can never speak of mere accompaniment, because when you look at the accompaniment, you start to realize that it is a melody. Look at these shapes that he's creating all the time are absolutely linear, and that's why the music's so amazing. So, second phrase. I'm afraid I'm sight reading again, but there we go. I think I commented on this beautiful harmony before with this marvellous that thing. Now, this second phrase, even more amazing, it contains something that would be familiar to those of you who know about Renaissance music, a false relation, where there's a D natural in that diminished chord in the right hand and a D flat in the left, because it's polyphonic, the left hand is dropping from D flat to C flat to B flat in the next bar, and the right hand is going from, do you see that clash there? The D to the E flat, but it doesn't feel weird or nasty, it feels completely logical because those two elements are polyphonic, pulling in different directions. So if you want an indicator of how counterpoint is working, that bar is perfect. It sounds amazing because of the inner logic of the counterpoint between the parts. So this beautiful, chord, sort of appoggiatura. Second phrase now goes towards G minor, which is a perfect symmetry with what happened in the first phrase, because in the first phrase, it did this. Same thing, but here. It did exactly the same, but in E flat, but somehow it's sort of more melancholy this time because it's done it in G minor. Then we go on. The cellos have that tune. Piano comes out of it. Look at this wonderful surprise of the D flats there, which make it. There's the D flat, pulls the music towards, there's the D flat, towards A flat, which itself, that A flat, why does it go to A flat? I suppose A flat could turn us towards the diminished chord on A, and then to the second inversion of E flat, which is where it's ultimately going. So you turn to A flat 7, with this very contrapuntal left hand. Then you have this wonderful German sixth on C flat. And then, just as you reach that point, now here's the point where in Mozart you'd have a cadenza, you might have a cadenza. You always have some sort of sense that you've reached the climactic point when you reach that second inversion, because the second inversion has to resolve homeward. And at this moment where we reach the second inversion, Rachmaninoff unleashes this new rhythm. Wonderful. So suddenly we've got these triplets shooting around, sort of bubbling around in the left hand in this wonderful independent, autonomous way that I've been talking about. Over the top of it, the melody's pushing even higher. It's not content with E flat major. It's turning into the augmented triad, which pulls us up a semitone to B7, and then E major, but with that gorgeous semitone appoggiatura, and then back down to the dominant. Fantastic. And that's the point where he then goes into a variation in triplets, wonderfully intricate variation, which I'm not even going to attempt to sight read. It's just magnificent. You've got, with all these extra things going on in the inner parts, magnificent. Shooting about, and that's the moment where the pianist perhaps first really, it has a kind of unfettered virtuosity about the writing. At the end of that passage, he writes what seems to be the simplest passage so far. I think this dates back to the kind of process you'd get in Haydn, actually, where you'd end the exposition with a simple idea. Haydn often wheels out something almost like a folk song. Beethoven does it too sometimes, just brings out a simpler tune to wrap up the exposition so everyone feels happy at the end of the exposition. Here it is in Rachmaninoff's case, it's this lovely artless thing with full four voice chords in the right hand. Bass drops to A flat, G major, and then oboe and clarinet play this lovely melody. Now, of course, that melody is the tune that we've just heard. The piano, so they take the melody and they do the same thing. Here's the clever thing. The piano then does a canon. This is the second canon we've encountered so far. Do you see that? It's like Bach. So the piano, you know, such a clever composer. He was taught by Taneyev, the great Russian contrapuntist who drilled counterpoint into his students. And that's why Scriabin and Rachmaninoff, who were both students of his, had this amazing grasp of counterpoint, absolutely fluent, effortless grasp of counterpoint. So mixed together, that's that canon. Does this, da, da. It's like this sort of thing. I'm missing out this left hand, but you see the sort of thing. So magnificent passage, and then this famous moment where the piano rises up. Do you remember Eric Blom's remark that I read last week, that silly, pompous, idiotic critic saying it's all arpeggiated, there's limited textural invention. Here, Rachmaninoff just sails upwards, absolutely new area of the piano. And it's not just arpeggiated, look at the arpeggios under that melody. Look at this. So A flat, G, D, C, F, E flat, and so on. So it's got its own melody. Da, ba, ba, ba. Do you see? Ba, ba. Anyway, as if I needed to prove that this isn't just arpeggiated, but it's magnificent. It just sails over the top. Look at that D flat, just, oh, magnificent. Turning to A flat. We've still got these wonderful inner voices, and then of course underneath the sailing, sort of quietly, gently sailing upwards to the first violins with the clarinet, but a couple of octaves lower. So part of the beauty of the passage is the sound of it, that lovely sound of the clarinet mixed with the first violins 2 octaves below the right-hand pinging of the piano. It's just so good. And then at the end of that, the rhythm again, he knows, right, I need to energize. So he has this marvelous diatonic passage, again with these inner voices moving up, but in triplets. And then at the top, it absolutely, again, it moves into a new gear with semiquavers and these wonderful, sort of alternatives to perfect cadences, which are really, well, sort of B minor or C flat minor. Do you see how that's contrapuntally? It makes sense, even though it's not a conventional cadence. I'm just going to play a tiny bit of Richter's famous recording, just so you hear that gear changing process, and you'll see that there's something actually miraculous about the way in which Rachmaninoff, and I think he's really almost unique in this regard, is able to just gear change quite concisely from something apparently slow moving to something apparently fast moving, but all within the same broad tempo. It's just wonderful. So often I listen to Rachmaninoff. He's one of the few composers. I noticed it recently when I listened to his second sonata, where you hear it and you go, well, I don't know how he's composed it. I don't know how he's composed it. It's so intricate, it's so exquisite. The craftsmanship is so sublime, overwhelming. Have a listen. This is Richter. So we come to the end of what seems like the exposition, really, with the piano just sort of doing that wonderful moment where the brass suddenly take over and bang us into G major. In effect, you've got these 2 tonal areas where you can finish an exposition in classical form if you're in a minor key. So we're in C minor, you've just finished in E flat. It's incredibly classical. E flat major. Now the brass have shifted us wonderfully and surprisingly into G, which is the other place you can finish. So he's got the best of both possibilities. So we got into the dominant, and then the piano has its wonderful kind of the same gesture, really, with these marvelous. But this time it's E flat minor to G, sort of tertiary cadences, and that plunges down to the bottom. And then we go into the development section. So in the narrative, this is where things are being kind of worked out. The orchestra is the orchestra for a bit, just like in a Mozart concertos, we have an orchestral passage. Now, what's being developed is the opening melody. The opening melody in a kind of dialogue with the 4 notes of the cadential pattern. So you get the orchestra. Do you see the da ba 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 is now being presented in diminution in a very, this is like Beethoven, it's incredibly intricate and clever, or Bach even, like that. So there's the 2 motifs in counterpoint. You can hear it in the melody is in the left hand, I'm playing it in the left hand, it's actually in the violas. Someone pointed out in the comments that the viola, I think this is true, was Dr. Dahl, the dedicatee's instrument, and there's a lot of melodies in the viola. So there's the viola playing the melody. And over the top, in the woodwind, in the flute, you've got da 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 da, a new line sort of passing over the top. It's almost like a counterpoint exercise in the sense that I'm sure it's the sort of thing he had to do for Taneyev when he was at the Moscow Conservatoire. Write a passage over a pedal. So the pedal point here is C. And and then we go to A flat, but you've still got the C pedal. Do you hear how the C is just running through? So the clever thing here is that at the beginning of the development section, you've got a sort of harmonic stasis, the sense that C is just there all the way through. In a minute, it'll move to D, but for a long period, it's just C. But of course, the harmony's moving in these fascinating places, E flat, and then well, we've still got essentially got that C pedal, and here's the tune in F minor, but still with the C pedal in a different place, the melody. Ingenious little things going on around the pedal, and then ba-ba-bum, we start to move to D. And this is where the piano comes in with these amazing, can't play this, but this sort of, what is it? All this business. So marvelous. The left hand is going da da da. These, and then the right hand takes that over. But look at the linearity of it, with each figure changing, moving down. Also the da 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 da, the figure is in there. And the whole style of it, do you remember Eric Blom saying it was all one texture? I mean, could anything be less true? This is all Rachmaninoff's famous kind of scherzando style. This sort of light, filigree, wonderful, almost mischievous, not at all heavy idiom that he was so good at, with these sort of playful patterns. And dialogue between orchestra and piano with this wonderful scherzo material. There's a D pedal, and then we shift up to G pedal, and this is the point where the da-da-da-da-da-da-dum material starts to take over. You start to get this this business, dun, da, 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 dun, da, 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 dum, all based on that motif, speeded up, and underneath this più vivo thing, where the piano's shooting about doing this kind of thing, and you sort of think, what's this all about? Slightly ghostly, da 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 da. That business, kind of ghostly piano writing. It's really a kind of what we call heterophony. The orchestra is playing the same thing, but da 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 over a B flat pedal. And what does that mean? Where's he got it from? Da 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 da. Well, think back to the opening theme. That third bar, the da da da. If you take that and you go ba 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 ba, so it's all developmental. As I say, it's like Beethoven. It's got this amazing developmental quality with the piano kind of doing its weird ghostly heterophony over the top. Things ratchet up a bit. We get this new melody emerging on the da 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 da. These syncopated things. That's what the orchestra plays over the top of the piano, and then eventually we hit this wonderful moment where we're in B flat major, and a kind of heroic. It's the same theme. E flat, which is the key, the eroica, the key of heroes. Underneath the orchestra course, and that melody, do you recognize that melody? It's the second subject. So there's the second subject. And the piano's going ba 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 bum ba 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 ba. Now, Rachmaninoff's a master of climax. He gradually works his way through the gears. The rhythms get more syncopated, more turbulent. Here the rhythms are fully syncopated. The bass is dropping chromatically. And they're hitting the dominant. That's because we're going to resolve in a minute. So, but he's just building up this tension around that drop to the dominant. Piano, of course, doing this amazing thing over the top of that syncopation with this da 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 ba ba ba. So classic Rachmaninoff, big, magnificent, sort of turbulent chords. And then that shifts to the Neapolitan, D flat. The flattened supertonic doesn't do that, sorry. This is the da 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 da, that, which of course is the that motif, the da 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 da, but it's slowed down to da 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 da, approaching the dominant upwards, F sharp to G. Piano at the same time going da 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 da, these wonderful accent points, and then it's like fire, really, a sort of incendiary effect with the orchestra building over these notes that surround the dominant. A flat, A natural, A flat, B flat, B natural, and then onto the dominant, a bit like the opening where you move from the dominant 13th to a sort of C9, and then actually what's really happening, these chords don't mean anything. I shouldn't just name these chords. There's a chromatic movement, just like in the beginning, that's mirroring that chromatic movement from B to B flat to A flat, B, and then the melody, an amazing way of moving towards the recap with this incredible impact, like there's an inexorability. I can't think of anything more inexorable. To make it even more so, he's got this sort of fire breaking out the piano with these sort of kind of Lisztian effect with the two hands, like a sort of trill, with a kind of trill of chords, really, rising up the piano until it reaches the top, and then we get this dropping right down to the bottom, and then of course this is the great moment where the two themes are wheeled out simultaneously, the main theme in the orchestra and the new theme, which is of course based on the cadential notes, but brought out in this wonderful heroic style, and super rhythmic. Have you noticed how it's almost like the Rite of Spring, in that you've got this accent on the first speed, first, third, first, fourth. So it almost every beat of the bar at some point has an accent. One, two, and that's just on the offbeat. And here's another one, 4, 1. So the reason why it sounds so cool and has this amazing groove is because of these tremendous accent points that are very carefully integrated into the music to give it maximum thrill, really. A very bold thing, though, at the end of this is the way in which he pulls away from that amazing texture and suddenly just piano. The point where originally we had the cellos played that melody originally with a piano accompaniment. Here, just piano, almost like the focus is, we've had everybody, and suddenly just the individual, just the solitary human soul, if you like. Like that moment in the Fifth Symphony I talked about a few weeks ago where the solo oboe plays just after the recap, same sort of spot. Here it's the piano on its own. I won't go into too much detail about the recap. It's wonderfully different from how it first appeared in the exposition, but there's this amazing moment where the horn plays the second subject. The piano has nothing to do with the second subject, just the horn floating over the top of these string chords. It's an amazing moment because in the narrative arc of the music, what an extraordinary thing to present the second subject in this wonderful way initially in the exposition, and then when it comes back in the recap, it just sounds like a memory. The horn is an instrument associated with memory and nostalgia, and there it is, just floating the melody over these hushed, tremolando chords, and it just feels like a recollection of the past, like a lost romance, if you like, something that was and can never be again. That's the extraordinary thing. So here, into the sort of artifice of sonata form, Rachmaninoff is just bringing a narrative component that would never really have occurred to a German composer in the 19th century. You know, you don't really get this in Brahms or anyone, maybe a little bit with Tchaikovsky, who was Rachmaninoff's mentor. But it's this conception of form in an absolutely reinvigorated way, as if the classical sonata form has been reinvigorated in terms of a kind of Russian narrative, like Chekhov or something. It feels like there's this narrative out. It's wonderful. I realise you get this a bit in Mahler, of course. There's a great Austro-German composer who's also bringing narrative into sonata form. These are composers who reinvent the form anew. But there's no question in my mind that what's happening in the second concerto of Rachmaninoff's is an absolutely compelling reconception of form. And it's so brilliant that no one realises how good it is. I don't think I've ever read a paper or anything on the handling of form, but you couldn't improve it. It's perfect. And then at the end of the second subject, there's this wonderful moment, which I mentioned last week, so I'm not going to go into much detail about this, but it's a meditation on the cadential notes, all this business, cellos in dialogue with the piano, C pedal in the bass. He's so good at this kind of thing, with the harmony moving around. He learned this from Chopin, harmony moving around over the pedal point, C in the bass, cellos. And then we work our way towards what is in effect the end of the movement, and we get this some wonderful, effortlessly beautiful tierce de Picardy, like a Baroque, like Bach, like the C major ending. But of course it isn't the end, because we go off into a sort of transcendental realm. And this is the moment. Do you remember in the last video I said there's this moment when I was in my early 20s, I was converted to Rachmaninoff by this passage, which is just amazing. So what's happening here? These astonishing chords, just as good as early Schoenberg. You know, it's absolutely progressive and wonderful music, with quintuplets in the left hand and triplets in the right. So you've got this kind of, like his friend Scriabin, he's playing games with floating rhythmic ratios. It's so clever. And then we've got that sort of D7-ish thing, and then look at this, A flat 7, and then I turn over the page, look at this one. Oh, look at that, a wonderful augmented chord that's coming round to C, half diminished. Still got triplets against quintuplets. It's just amazing harmony. So melancholy. Sorry, D7. I'm playing the orchestra as well. And then cadencing. And then at the moment where you cadence, we go up a gear, and you've got this terrific groove, which is going to be with us to the end of the song. Da, 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 and the orchestra is going bum, bum, bum. So it's got this marvellous sense of inexorable sort of march to the end. And then, do you remember at the opening melody? This. The rise of the sixth. All those adjacent notes, and then suddenly he swoops up the sixth. This is a thing that he learned from Schubert, I think, the ability to write a melody in consecutive notes, and so that when you have a intervallic jump like that, with that wonderful harmonic shift, it has this stomach churning quality. Now here, just at the end, he returns to that, but in this wonderful way, with the groove, cellos, the same A flat, and the piano, back to the groove, and then a da, ba, even bigger jump to B. The piano does that sort of thing, and then the second time we cadence. This time, oh, wonderful! He speeds up the harmonic rhythm. There's a change of chord in each half bar. Isn't that wonderful? That shift to A flat, more interesting than that. There. Oh, it's just so fabulous. And then, of course, to return to the cadential pattern from the opening, but this time, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. He loves these kind of sort of military style, ba-da-dum, heroic rhythms. And then we get this series, almost like Tchaikovsky, who pioneered this way of, you know, in Tchaikovsky, how you can have sort of these patterns of unresolving, sort of German sixths that never resolve, that kind of thing. But here it's very clever. With the descending bass towards C minor, magnificent. And the piano, of course, shooting up. No, that's, yeah, sorry. Not the easiest music to sight read. The great thing with Rachmaninoff is the piano writing is, of course, very difficult, but it lies under the fingers in this wonderful way. It just sort of, in a sense, it's effortless once you've learned the notes, which I haven't. It's magnificent. Bloody hell, Rachmaninoff, what an amazing composer. If you like this video, and I'll need to have a lot of likes and a lot of shares and a lot of popularity on this, because I want to go on and do the second movement and the finale. So please vote for it with your feet, if that makes sense as an expression. Could you like and subscribe? And also, if you feel like it, content like this isn't two a penny on the internet, is it? We live in a grim era where most of the stuff that seems to be visible online is increasingly awful. But if you want content like this, please like, subscribe, press the bell, and think about giving. We're a channel that we're a little channel, and we'd really appreciate your gifts. We so appreciate our patrons. They are wonderful, superb body of people, and we wouldn't survive without their generosity. And if you feel like joining our patrons and giving to the channel, we would just love you, because we need some support to keep this content flowing and remain freely available, because I love doing these videos, but they come at a certain cost in terms of energy and creativity. I know I'm just making it up as I go along, but it's not as easy as it looks. If you like what we're doing, please give generously. Thank you for watching, and see you soon. Bye.